everyone, welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. If you're new here, welcome. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content recorded live in the Invictus Discord as Malevolent is in its 5th season. This show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a recent update. So if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released to chapter 230 or part 46, check out now and come back next time. Our episodes are recorded so you can always listen later. I'm Queen, my pronouns are she, her, and tonight I control like half of Arthur's hair follicles.
Only half. Okay, interesting. I am PinchofPeppers, usually Peppers. My pronouns are she, her, and today I am controlling his entire organ system.
That's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, well, half of it isn't working, so I think I'll be good.
Well, also, you've just illuminated so many things you could say in future autopsy episodes, because I've really been thinking about this, and we are going to run out of body parts and organs and limbs.
I'm pretty sure I've said his fingers or his eyelids like twice, because that's the only thing I can think of.
No, I doubt it. You don't look up like pictures of body stuff to figure out what you're going to say?
No, then I get queasy and I start crying and throwing up, so.
No, you don't. Well, I mean, you don't need a picture, but like a diagram that points out what things are called.
Yeah,
you know
I don't
I'm
know.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was assuming you do any prep for autopsy whatsoever.
Oh,
My bad.
okay, so maybe I'll just go ahead and leave, and I will go ahead and take my summary with me. How about that? Yeah.
No, Peppers, will you please, pretty please, super pretty please, summarize chapter 230 for us?
I guess. So, in 230, did you say 233?
No, I said 230.
Oh, well, this matcha hopefully will kick in soon. Okay, so start of the episode. Arthur has fallen asleep. In his dream, he encounters a creature who uses his own voice to communicate. It notes that he came to him following the lights, unlike, quote, many others, especially the dead. Arthur confirms that he was incapable to resist the pull of the light and was lured in by this creature. It intends to feast on Arthur as it has done with all other victims. It reveals that it is, quote, beyond the stars, end quote, and to sustain itself, its light is used as essentially like a righteous flame to lead others towards it. The nearby village has done so for generations. It reveals its name as Horig, H-O-R-I-G, I think I spelled that right, and that it is an extension of the forest. Arthur bargains for his life, offering to bring more victims who are both younger and healthier. Arthur also calls it O Great One, kind of a hint that it may be an eldritch god. And Horig seems pleased, naming him an apostle. After this, Arthur awakens. John reveals that he was sleeping. They are both in a graveyard. It is in the morning. Arthur kind of rushes away, heading towards the stream. Once there, Arthur feels safe enough to reveal his encounter with Horig. They move towards the village as well and find that all of the villagers are dead, their bodies in a pile. Disturbed, they move towards the road, out of the forest and out of Horig's influence.
I have to read this comment while you were giving your lovely recap. Rebecca said, Arthur got sorry, I was gonna say, I don't actually know what that word is. Shanghai. Okay, there we go. I was gonna say shenanigan, which I think is funnier, but wrong. So I will read the quote as it has been written. Rebecca says, Arthur got shenanigan. Wow. No, I guess I was determined to say what I wanted to say.
How about I get it? Okay. So according to Tiny Rebecca, Arthur got shanghaied into participating in Horig's multi-level marketing scheme.
Thank you, Peppers.
We love an icon.
All right. So what did you think?
I mean, Horg is just like an entrepreneur at the end of
An
the day.
entrepreneur.
He's just a girl boss at this point. A single mom working so hard. We love him. I thought
A
this was
single mom.
interesting.
Interesting. Interesting depiction of a god that eats people.
Do you not know the Reba song? A single
No,
mom who works
I
too hard,
definitely know
who
the
loves her kids and never stops.
I know the song. I just think that's an interesting way to describe Horig specifically.
Those are not the lyrics. Yes, they are. Yes, there are. How dare. Anyway, I loved this chapter. I thought it was very interesting. I very interesting too that we are essentially meeting what I believe to be another eldritch god, great old one. I don't know if it's an implication that it's either a fragment of a great old one or if it is straight up a great old one, which would be very interesting. I'm interested to see how this creature will kind of be involved in the rest of the season. I'm also very curious as to how this is going to impact Arthur. Obviously, Arthur does not intend to go through with feeding him people. That is at least my understanding of Arthur's character. But Arthur has a tendency to be in way over his head at almost all circumstances. So I'm very curious to see how he might be able to outsmart this thing or if he's even able to do so. Yeah. How about you?
I have to briefly shout out Vol Control, who says Arthur stopped making deals with Eldritch Gods level impossible, and Roanoke, who's saying plot twist. Arthur is like, excellent. Now I can kill everyone. Yeah, I don't know. I thought this chapter was interesting. I definitely think something's wrong. Something's up in a less obvious way than it would first appear. I got a very weird vibe from this chapter. It felt in some ways like Arthur was not acting like himself beyond what we're seeing, because I know that, for example, he was being kind of our influence was being messed with by the will-o-wisps or the fairy lights that they were following, but he made some interesting decisions in this chapter, specifically the fact that he was so quick to agree and to fold, to just say like, yeah, sure, younger ones, yeah, whatever you want, dude. And part of me is wondering if that's just his repeated interactions with these things that make him do what they want or they kill him. Maybe it is something that he's, I mean, I hate to say it, but maybe Arthur's learning. Maybe he has to, maybe this is him trying to agree and do what this thing wants regardless. But I still get the impression that even Arthur, who has been through a lot by now and knows the game and knows the drill and wouldn't actually agree to give over children to this thing, maybe something's changed about him that isn't necessarily like let go yet. Maybe he's further been like entangled in whatever this hold has on him. Yeah, because it just felt like he agreed way too quickly for someone so stubborn and so determined and repulsed.
Yeah, I think I'll counter that a little bit, mainly because the way that I think my initial listening of it, I was like, oh, Arthur's immediate agreement, I do think, number one, he has learned from his past mistakes of going, no, I'll never do what you want, and then him getting stabbed immediately. I think he's kind of like, okay, we've done this, we've done this song and dance before, let's wisen up a little bit. I don't honestly believe that he means at all what he is saying to Horig. I absolutely believe it was kind of something made out of desperation. He's experienced things like this over and over again. I think maybe he's a little worn down. He's like, oh my god, this is like the third eldritch agreement with a spooky little creature this week. Because reminder, Scratch has like it's been like a week ago still.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he's going through it, and he's just like, oh, I just want to get out of this forest. I think what would be interesting to me, maybe in the next episode is confronting whether or not Arthur believes that he's gonna just be able to get out of the forest and not have any repercussions of him agreeing to work with this thing, or if he's kind of like, okay, fuck, even though we're out of Horig's influence, this is going to have repercussions, and we need to find a way to kind of quote unquote get out of this deal. But I don't necessarily, in the same way that like his deal with Scratch in that basement thing, I very much understood him being like, yes, absolutely, I'll do whatever you want, because it's a either in this situation it's either get eaten or agree to feed him quote unquote younger people. But I do also understand in some way that it was a little, I think, not necessarily jarring, but a little like, oh, that he immediately didn't react to somebody saying, I want you to feed me younger villagers or younger souls. Because when I hear younger, I'm like, oh, like kids.
Yeah.
and I would imagine that Arthur would react more volatile to that, but hopefully he has wisened up and just keeps his mouth shut.
Fish has pointed out that he envisioned Arthur maybe starting to struggle and like tree roots encircling him, because there is a section of the transcript that does describe our wood creaking, Arthur making noises of struggle, and then the trees quieting and things like that once he starts to say wait, wait, wait. And supposedly that might lead to the Horig being like, I am listening, which is the next line after that. I mean, I guess I'm trying to keep my mind as open as possible to potential less obvious responses to this, because I am so aware that my brain will do backflips and bends to make things make sense when they don't. And that's how I end up getting the wrong impression. Like, I really didn't, because I liked the concept of the dark world as it was described from the very beginning, I didn't want to believe that it was a really bad place that nobody wanted to be, because I liked the idea that I had already created in my own head of what the dark world was going to be like. Though I managed to go for a long time in Malevolent not really getting the fact that it was not a great place and that you don't want to be there for everybody, not necessarily just John. That is because I made up a lot of logic in my head to support my own idea. And so I'm just trying to think like, yeah, I guess you could say that maybe he's learned and maybe he's just scared. And there's a lot of rationale that for us, I think makes a lot of sense when put into life or death situations. But I don't know. I'm just getting the impression that we got out of this way too easy. This was just a matter of lying. And Horig even said, you could be lying, but it doesn't matter. Horig was fully aware that he had no way to follow up with Arthur on this, and that Arthur was just going to leave, and there was no way that he could enforce, like, whether or not Arthur is going to follow through on this. So the fact that it was just so easy to get out of this by saying the right words just strikes me weird. And I don't feel like everything is over. I also think that we all sort of know that you don't get out of an encounter with anything supernatural, especially not a malevolent, without that biting you in the ass later. So there's a lot of, I know that there is some pre-existing lore and literature on Horig that tons of people are way more educated on than I am. And I definitely know that we will have people on to talk about that are more acquainted. Maybe there should be like a lore podcast that somebody else makes who like knows more about that, because I always feel like we're doing a disservice because the two of us, neither one of us knows anything about that stuff.
Hey,
I feel like
I will argue that we're essentially laymen in this regard. We're just here to bring them like the surface level the surface level observations.
I'm the common man.
I'm a common man. I will point out a couple things that a couple people have mentioned in chat that they have reminded me of. Number one, Horg absolutely did say, quote, "You already carry what I desire." Girl, what does that mean? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Some people are implying that that Horig has infected Arthur with little spores. Love that. Meaning I don't. Meaning I don't love that.
He already carries what Horig desires, which is a bunch of badass scars. That's what I'm going with.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Horig wants
Okay.
to look as
Interesting.
cool and vibing as Arthur in his Gambison-less armor.
Yeah, just you wait. I swear. I am just saying I would be so vindicated if he gets like, I don't know, like kicked by a horse right in the chest and like half of his ribs break. I will be cheering. But also, Tiny Rebecca has made a really interesting point that I never thought of a potential for Arthur to kind of wiggle his way out of this his deal is he will feed Horig, quote unquote, younger souls, but that implication might be that it would be the hag's babies,
Yeah.
which I never thought of, and I was like, ooh, that's really smart.
Or it could be John. Arthur carries John, too.
Oh yeah, that I for a second I thought you were like, or he could feed John to Horig. I was like, I don't think so.
Now, Scotty says something really cool, which is, I just can't get the pinky out of my head here. Another forest that keeps people within it unless it chooses to release.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. No. And then Fish includes Call of Cthulhu, Dark Ages lore. Just a note for those of you unaware, Malevolent is very... I don't want to say loosely, but Malevolent is inspired by, has been influenced by Call of Cthulhu. Harlan and his friends have done previous Call of Cthulhu games, and that lore now wraps in to Malevolent. But a reference is, I'll just note it, The Ring. Horig uses a toadstool ring to lure victims like some carnivorous plants lure insects. Every breeze that wafts across the mushroom's caps spreads a warm and earthy, inviting scent. The fungi appear normal from a distance, but up close, anyone who looks upon their strange coloration and inhales their odor must make a POW roll. Not sure what that is, but pretty sure it's...
A POW roll!
A POW roll! I'm sure it's like a resistance roll. If successful, nothing happens, but if failed, the victim is driven into a frenzied dance around the mushroom ring. While dancing, the investigator must make a hard constitution roll. If successful, he or she snaps out of the dance. If failed, the victim collapses unconscious, within the ring and also becomes a carrier for Horig's virulent plague. Ooh. Cumulative 5% chance per 5 minutes spent in the ring. The keeper, I'm assuming that's like the game master, should pick a suitable disease from the diseases table. And then I'm not going to read the rest, but it's implied that he's diseased now.
Yeah, I think we're in trouble.
I mean, when has he not been?
In trouble. I wish this had led to something else. I don't know what. Maybe like, I don't know, an evil mushroom or something like that. Maybe not. There's a lot happening. Sadly, there was no poll this week, as unfortunately
shame.
we have to accept that sometimes there will be times without polls, and I don't like it, but I mean, it's gotta happen. There's gotta be a transitional week, and next week we get a fun, cool... I'm trying so hard to keep my spirits up, but it's really difficult. I miss polls so much. I miss polls that I could engage in.
Meanwhile, I'm giggling and kicking my feet because there's no tense fighting within the patron. I don't know why, but polls stress me out. So I just find that a very hilarious difference between the two of us. How you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sad that there's no polls. And I'm like, oh, thank God the family isn't fighting.
And I just have to wonder, Peppers, why did you choose to do a podcast with me?
Well, because I love fighting with a singular person, but the moment there's two people getting up on me, I start crying and throwing up. But since it's just one-on-one, I feel like I could use you as like a conduit of all my anger.
This is a safe space, Peppers.
Okay, therapy session.
It's absolutely not. You're still wrong about cheese versus bread.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah, okay. I know where you live.
we do, we do have a special somebody joining us for the no vote week. And I would like to bring back on Ren. Welcome, Ren.
Hi everybody. I'm Ren, they, them pronouns, and tonight I control Arthur's come down from his horrid Kai.
That's a very good
Slay.
one.
Yes.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Yeah, love to have you, Ren. You are the best ever, and we are very excited to have you on. I know that I don't know, have we been on together with Ren, or has it just been me?
No. Ren kind of acted as the guest for when I was gone because I was just having more important stuff happen to me that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ren came in and absolutely killed it. And now I don't need to be here anymore.
Yeah, see ya.
Yeah, bye. And then I leave.
Hi.
Okay, so we
Oh,
asked everybody before the show because I didn't have any ideas, if what Ren, Peppers, and I should talk about today. We already covered how the code was cracked, and so I didn't want to go over the same things again. And surprise, surprise, everyone in the chat basically just joked around. There were some great suggestions, but they definitely were more applicable to future episode ideas that I have that are more evergreen, that things that, discussing some historic moments or going over things that don't necessarily line up with the most recent chapter and are kind of general or overall questions. So they were great, genuinely great ideas. I just had some other things that I thought would be I thought we should try and keep them recent as much as possible. So Harlan actually came into the chat and gave us some ideas on things to talk about. And I want to give Ren first pick of which thing that they want to start with first.
yes. Oh, I'm so excited. All these questions are really, really good, but obviously, as a massive Arthur stan, I have to go with the Arthur question, which is this is the first time we've seen Arthur so manic slash crumble under the weight of a force. Why? Was it purely magic? Has he changed? What was the intention there? And that question coming from Harlan got my little gears turning, and I went back and I re-listened to a bunch of old episodes, and I really was turning this around in my mind. So I'm so excited to discuss it with you too.
Yeah, I am very excited about the idea that he posed here, and this is partially why my gears got turning. I definitely felt like Arthur's response was weird, like I said earlier, but I feel like it, I feel like the idea of Arthur crumbling so quickly when he's faced so much crazier stuff and been like way more stubborn and determined, wild.
So I went back to truly check on this before I said it, but the only other time in the entire series we've seen Arthur Manic at all is during part 21, The Unconquerable, in season 3, where he drinks the drink in Addison. And then he has a moment when the piano is playing when he starts to laugh hysterically in basically the same way that we heard in this part. And the minute that he starts doing that, he like almost like hears himself and snaps, not snaps out of it, but is like, I need to go. I need to get to a room. I need to leave this situation, which makes me feel like, is he, you like, has he seen this in himself before? But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. But then the other times that we've seen him, seen his mind be messed with, he's still been lucid. Even at the beginning of the nightmare, even though he didn't know he was in a dream, he still had his faculties. And so I think that part of why he is so quick to negotiate in this chapter is because in the previous chapter, we see him be manipulated in a way we have truly never seen him be manipulated before. He has lost autonomy in a way that he never has before, and that's really, really scary.
Yeah, I want to hop on that because especially with this regarding Arthur, we don't see this often. This is kind of Harlan's confirmation that he has kind of crashed out at the very least in this episode. And the way that I looked at it was using the context of the entirety of season 5. Number one being the latest track that Harlan has released called, well, it's not the latest, but it's kind of the key track soundtrack for this season, which is titled Lost. And I know that we've really been applying that to John, but I think this is also really starting to apply to Arthur as well, especially during this season. I feel that a lot of his foundations for this past 4 seasons have been shaken. In season 5, we're seeing him slowly heal over, how he feels with Faro. But we're also seeing him being slowly broken down time and time again by the constant horrors that he's been enduring. We're also seeing him kind of losing sight of what he wants for his future, especially in season 4. His motivations seem to change of, oh, first we're going to find out how John and I are going to separate, but oh, in season 4 we're going to go ahead and locate the information about this cult. And then halfway through there, he's going to decide to actually, let's just go to England. Once this is finished, let's just go to England, which is, to me, when I initially heard it, I'm like, wow, this is like really random. But I think this is very quickly showing that Arthur is starting to kind of be shaken out of all these different kind of prior points in life that he's really solidified himself with. And now I feel that he's lost and he's being broken down slowly by the stress of everything. Because you especially see that in season 3, half of the reason, in my opinion, that he completely loses it when he, drinks at the bar is his body breaking down due to the trauma. And I think now that he's in season 5, I think his body is doing the same thing again. Because well, I don't forget. He did die two episodes ago. So I find that very interesting how maybe this is impacting Arthur's psyche negatively, both positively and negatively. That we've had this great moment of him kind of healing a little bit over Faro, but now he's also, the stress of everything that he's endured, I think, is finally getting to him.
You know what's an interesting thing though is that the juxtaposition between when Arthur is lucid and he feels not in control, his dominant thing is anger and lashing out and trying to regain control through whatever he can do, right? And we've seen that time and again where, faced with impossible decisions, he will die trying, literally, to regain any kind of control, even if that's slitting his own throat. Versus this time, he lost control in such a completely different way. It isn't Kane and the King in Yellow telling him he has no control. It is literally him losing something that he really truly values, which is his mental autonomy. And really is one of the only things he has left because he doesn't have autonomy over his body anymore, right? So him immediately going into like, I'm going to make a deal, I'm going to lie my ass off, and I'm going to get out of this no matter what, I think goes back to what Peppers was saying at the beginning of the episode, and Queen too. And I really, really agree that Arthur is absolutely learning and that he's trusting his own experiences and he's realizing better how to deal with these entities. And then I'll also throw in, I think this, out of all of the seasons in season 5, is the season of John and Arthur getting moments by themselves to show off their expertise and their learning from the other seasons. Like we got this beautiful thing with John of, him, the culmination of his learnings throughout the last 4 seasons. And this really feels like a culmination of you can't just rage against the dying of the light. You have to be smarter than that with these entities. And he's taking what he said from season 4 when him and John are about to go talk to Oscar, and Arthur's like, you let them lead the conversation, and then you reveal what you know after. Arthur's using techniques and applying them now to entities, and I feel like we're seeing growth. It's great.
Yeah, I really love that point. That was not something I really thought of, but I think that's a good point as well of Arthur not saying anything and not reacting is not necessarily him just going with it. He's gonna gather all the information that he needs first with this entity and then act accordingly. And I think his agreement with this entity is more for him to just buy some time.
Mm-hmm. And get the fuck out of there. Yeah.
Hi, this is Mizra, part of the audio editing team for Autopsy, here with a quick editor's note for the rest of this episode. The next part has variable degrees of sound quality due to some technical difficulties, including Queen's mic completely giving out and losing the rest of her dialogue. We had to re-record some of her comments and insert them into the episode to preserve the conversations. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, great point. So the next one is, I think we're going to go with, how does dealing with established lore change the meta decisions?
Because I agree with what Roanoke said, that it might feel a little negative to perhaps other people who are really enjoying the addition to pre-existing like Lovecraftian lore. But Roanoke says, as someone who does not spend a lot of time in the poll chat, there was so much I felt I was missing because of the Horrig lore being a legit known monster. It was really confusing to feel behind, even though we were listening to the same podcast. I was like, when did we decide Arthur got the plague? I do definitely agree with that. I am definitely somebody who prefers podcasts and stories that are solely standalone. And I still think that Malevolent does that. I do think it absolutely is influenced by the Call of Cthulhu like bestiary. I don't know what you would call it. Very much like a D&D DM master. As someone who is a DM, I very usely will use whatever templates there are for monsters and stuff. But at the end of the day, I tend to make largely homebrew stories. And so Malevolent still feels like it's homebrew, but the some of the characters or I'm sorry, some of the antagonists of some of the monsters like that are still tied in to the Call of Cthulhu bestiary, which I'm okay with. But there is a certain line that's sometimes just not very defined. But there is at some points when people understand or are suspecting something about the characters or about the villain that is so beyond any knowledge that I have that I don't have the time or the energy or the bandwidth to read about and to educate myself more on. But I think also at the same time, we have to remember I do love the lore people in here, but sometimes they are wrong. And sometimes they are, focusing on whatever lore and they're incorrect. And their expectations of the future episodes are wrong because I've noticed Harlan has a tendency to, yes, use the lore as kind of a starting off point, but then he makes it into his own thing later on. So I think it still does well to tie in kind of its original content, and so that nobody feels left behind necessarily. Sorry, go ahead, Ren.
Yeah. No, I it's very important to remember that even if it shares the same name, it might not share the same stat block. It might not share the same characteristics. I mean, just this part, Liz and I were DMing about all these questions earlier so that I could prepare better. And she pointed out with this question in particular that it's an insightful question to ask this time because we were trying to guess the monster of the week and we were wildly inaccurate for most of the part, right? Like, some of us were lulled into a false sense of security because we thought it was fairy folklore. And then it turned out to be a completely different guy. So you never know what Harlan's throwing at us. And even if the name's the same, the powers might not be the same. That happened last season with the Vizier. Some of it was the same and some of it wasn't. And you don't know what parts are going to be the same and you don't know what parts aren't. So I think I do like the lore. I don't end up reading a lot of the lore, but I am pretty versed with Call of Cthulhu and Lovecraft and can fumble my way around most of the time. But you can absolutely listen to Malevolent standalone and not know any of that. But the question is, how does dealing with the lore change the meta decisions? To Queen's point, it definitely changes the pull stuff for better and for worse because we have made incorrect decisions based on established lore before, and then sometimes finding the right established lore can completely change a poll decision. So it's all about playing the game. It's part of the game.
And that's why I feel like it's such a good idea to have a variety of voices when you're talking about the polls and when you're talking about the story, because you really do want the perspective of somebody who's removed from the lore and the really deep getting into the weeds of like what has been set up from games and outside sources and what is known about Lovecraftian lore in general and all of this stuff. I think it's great to have multiple perspectives, especially because you can be too close to it and not be able to see, oh, wait, this doesn't have to be an exact analog for what I read in the book. You know, it doesn't have to be exactly what I remember from this passage. It can be something totally different because it's a totally different medium. It's a totally different way of interacting with the story. So, yeah, I appreciate that.
There's sometimes, yeah, exactly. Totally, yeah. Sometimes it's Occam's razor, right? Sometimes it is very obvious when we've hit on the right thing, like when Fish discovered Mother Darkness, whatever her real name is, Yidra or whatever. It was like, oh, yeah, that's what's been going on.
Yeah, and I just don't really absorb that information, the lore, as well, when it's not already folded into the story for me. It's absolutely nothing against anyone else who does choose to do like what you could say is the pre-reading, I guess. It's just difficult to keep up with sometimes.
Well, and that's why I think that slow poll is such a great innovation in the poll ecosystem. Because for somebody like me, or perhaps Peppers, who just doesn't have the time, I'm not in poll chat a lot, slow poll is your digest, right? It's like your digest of need to know information. And the big lore dumps usually get bullet pointed in there. And that I love slow poll.
Yeah, slow pull is great, and well, even sometimes the comments in slow pull get a little long, and frankly, I don't always read the really, really long ones, and we know enough about Harlan's philosophy here, especially since Intermezzo, regarding the flexibility of the lore as it exists, right? Who fucking cares? Classic. That's basically showing us, hey, these pre-existing concepts, sometimes we stick to it, sometimes we don't, sometimes we do, and we still turn it on its head. So it can get, for me, it can get a little bit frustrating when everyone just kind of accepts that if a long comment contains some kind of lore logic or backstory, it's automatically more, I don't know, like validating or insightful.
You can just say you don't like Liz, it's fine.
No, oh my God. No, no, no. I love Liz though. No, it's not anything against Liz for posting this stuff. It's really not.
I can't believe Queen hates Liz so much. That's just so tragic.
Tweet it.
No, it's just that when people read Liz's lore reliant comments and logic, it causes them to lean really heavily on trusting her because it sounds like she knows more, I think, since not everyone can be as well versed in the history as she is. I mean, okay, well, anyone can, but you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm not really articulating this well, but I'm just saying despite the fact that there are arguments during polls that cite lore, that doesn't make them more concrete inherently. I still think there's equal chance it's off base.
Well, and Liz's will be fine with me reading a little bit of her answer to this question. Which she was like, I prefer, when possible, to treat any source that is not a piece of the two canon Call of Cthulhu timelines as slightly suspect, unless it is very obvious that we've successfully identified a monster or entity. And I think that's like trust but verify, right? I totally agree with Liz there. Treat everything as suspect unless it's beating us over the head obvious. Once again, Yidra, like, we nailed it. Fish nailed it. Yeah.
And
Okay.
and
Next.
one last thing as well that I just want to jump in. I also don't want to lambast people who are really enjoying that lore aspect, because I do think they bring value to the conversation as well. Because sometimes they are, like you guys said, absolutely on the dot. I don't want to sit here and be like, fuck you guys. I don't have time to read it, so I hate you guys. That's not what I mean at all.
I mean, that is what you
Um,
said. That's what I heard you
Okay, okay.
say.
Well, how dare you? That's really offensive to me specifically because that's not what I
Mm,
meant, even though I did say it like that, and other might
mhm.
might take it that way. But what I mean is absolutely I absolutely adore the people who do set out that lore. It is not something I will personally invest time into. I do think they bring in a lot of context to the future decisions, like the poll decisions, and I think it's good to have those pointed out.
I think this is another good place for a transition into a question, which is just basically how we felt about Harlan tackling this part as an RPG more than a typical episode. I just want to share that for me, I was a little behind. It kind of went a little bit over my head. Like, I was really into it, don't get me wrong, and it was very fun and very exciting, but it was a completely different vibe from what I was expecting and what I've been used to. And I loved that change and I thought it was really fun. And I'm glad we got his kind of a taste of what it used to be like almost, but definitely not territory I was familiar with. And so I'm really glad that I got to have a new experience. But it is sometimes really hard to follow the mechanic mindset when I'm so engrossed with the story, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. That makes me think about you saying the last time we talked that you haven't really done any like escape rooms or escape room in boxes kind of thing. Yeah, and it was very much like that. So I completely understand why it took you a minute like shift your thinking in that way versus me. I was like there right from the start, and I was like, well, as you know too, I was so deep in the wiki for a really long time, and the voting history means so much to me, and I always looked with envy on people like Marvin who got to be around for like the really, really cool shit. Every time there's like this really, really cool experience that Harlan gives us that will never happen again, possibly ever. I mean, people will probably try to replicate this in some way, but I probably won't be a patron for that. So, like, it's so, I don't know, it's really cool.
Yeah, it is, and I love that. So, next we have what about Horig feels different compared to other entities faced this season specifically? And honestly, yeah, I don't know. There's something so freaking creepy about the fact that he doesn't need Arthur to comply. Like, that's just a little scarier than I was prepared for. You're so used to antagonists that like want to torture you or something, but to have some just be so confident already, I don't know. That's really concerning and I don't know, I don't like it. I feel like it's going to come back around.
I think also super concerning is the fact that it is capable of affecting Arthur mentally, essentially like able to enthrall and almost control him. That shit's terrifying. I don't think even the King in Yellow was capable of doing that. He got into his head a lot, and I mean, yeah, he did kind of trick him in episode 18. So, but this guy fully capable of making him kind of essentially crash out and go into like a fun little LSD moment. That's a little concerning and a little terrifying. So I'm very curious to see what this guy's gonna do, honestly.
I'm not that scared of this guy. He can only do the LSD thing if we're in his area. We're not going to be in his area. He did give Arthur a disease, but I'm hoping that that just means Arthur's going to pass it on to other people, which is going to suck for Arthur, but in the grand scheme of things, isn't the worst thing in the world. You know, Arthur's going to feel guilty about it, but what can you do? To me, Horig was weird because he was very forthcoming about everything in a way that we haven't really seen from an entity before. He was like, "Hi, I'm Horrig. I'm from space. I'm a forest abomination, and I'm not new in town." He's the first entity we've ever encountered who was both capable of explaining all that stuff and very willing to explain all that stuff, which was really interesting to me. And compared to the Witch and Mother Darkness from this season, he seems much more detached and not emotional. The Witch was fully in her emotions, and Mother Darkness, we haven't met her yet, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Also, Yidra was born on this plane, right? I'm pretty sure, Fish, correct me if I'm wrong there. And the Witch was obviously born on this plane, but Horg's from space, which is really very, very cool.
Do you think he will be kind of similar in the way that Scratch was kind of this temporary adversary in season 4? Do you think Horrig will be a temporary adversary in season 5, or do you think we're going to see Horrig? Do you sense that he's going to be grander than we expect in season 6, or do you not really have enough like information to make that assumption?
Well, I would say 100% with a bullet, Yidra is the big bad of season 5, for sure. How Horrig grows, I think Horrig is one of those things where as an author, you put him in, and then depending on what you need and depending on how the voters vote, could be very, very small or could become a bigger, thing. It's a really nice piece to have on the board because you could do a lot with this. Because he's from space, especially, like, okay, if Harlan needs him to all of a sudden be one of the pantheon that he's building of those entities, then you've got another guy. Or if it's just something that kind of gets left as an unresolved thread, that I could see that happening too. I think it all depends on how the voters vote for the rest of the season.
Well, I'm definitely guilty of kind of thinking that like the older voters know more than me and I'm just gonna lean on them, and I'm trying not to do that. But like legacy voters, I mean, you guys have a history of understanding how the game is played. It's kind of like walking into a fresh table. I don't know, like I'm still kind of a new voter. I mean, not new, but I feel like there's a separation between how I would vote and how people who are more seasoned, more experienced, have been here longer, understand more, might vote. And so I tend to like, I don't know. I guess I tend to just assume that you guys know what you're talking about. I don't know.
I'm I'm wrong all the time. I'm wrong all the time. There's receipts. I gotta check you here. I gotta privilege check you here because you're a legacy voter now.
Oh my God, that's so weird. No, I'm not. No.
Yeah, you are. You are. Compared to a lot of the people, you are now one of those people. Like you got
No, I'm not. But like I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't have like the
like you do because you know the patterns. That's like saying we wipe the slate clean every week, which is not true, right? The votes and Harlan's the same guy and his storytelling's the same storytelling and it is the same story and it does build on itself. So the more experience you have with the votes, I think that does lend itself to some, not all, but some insight.
Well, yeah, it's very easy to feel intimidated by the surrounding group and like what's going on. I don't know. I just I feel like it's so easy to get really really nervous and really anxious about voting and not want to put yourself out there and vote with the majority whenever possible and stuff like that. But I don't know. I never really had like a bunch of anxiety about killing anybody or like doing it wrong. I mean, I guess, is there voter anxiety? I guess there is. I don't really remember that I was super anxious, but I do know it's a really common thing to hear about.
Yes, every time a new baby voter comes in and they're like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna kill Arthur and John."
I mean,
Yeah,
we've already done that, so
exactly.
Ren, it was so lovely having you on. I so deeply appreciate you coming on and joining us. You bring a lot of insight and a lot of great new perspective, and it is such a treasure having you. And you've done so much for the community, and I am just very thankful for having you on and for your presence here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Ren, I love your insight. I love the additional opinions that you bring. So it was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Sorry if Peppers and I kind of drowned you out with our yelling and bickering.
I'm not. I mean, you knew what you were getting into. So yeah, that's not my fault.
No, I brought it on myself.
All right, now we're going to do this in perfect unison. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. The horrors persist.
But so
And
do we.
so do we.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.